Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 417, and my guest is Richard Estep. A haunting at his grandparents sparked his curiosity, but it was years before Richard began to investigate the paranormal. You may have seen him on shows like TV's Haunted Case Files or Paranormal 911, among others, or maybe you've read a few of his 30-plus books ranging from killers to hauntings to fraudsters and histories. His book, A Grave Undertaking, comes out next month. It's all about the Blumberg family who bought the haunted funeral home. Heather was on the show a few weeks ago on episode 413. If you haven't listened to that, definitely check that out. Richard went and interviewed them and spent time in the house and wrote the Grave Undertaking book. So that's very cool. And as if all that wasn't enough to keep him busy, he's also a paramedic. He's a good guy. Really enjoyed talking to him. Good head on his shoulders. Proper amount of skepticism, pragmatism, and curiosity. It's a good combo, and that is always intriguing to me when it comes to things of the paranormal, to know that somebody really is not just all in for the sake of being all in, that they're really looking at it intellectually, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, with feeling as well. I think you have to have your senses alive and these sorts of things, but I'm excited for you to hear the episode. It's going to be cool. In other news, I was looking for something to watch. I was getting overwhelmed with all the politics and things from a couple weeks ago, and I started watching a show called Ghosts. It's a CBS show, but it's on Paramount Plus, and I got to tell you, the first few episodes I thought, this is kind of corny, but it's a sweet kind of corny, so I'm digging it. And then I just got sucked in. When I tell you I binge watched the whole thing, and it made me feel really good. There was something incredibly wholesome about it, and it made me feel like how I felt when I watched Ted Lasso or Schitt's Creek, just really good. I don't know if it's up your alley. I don't get paid to tell you to watch it or anything. I just thought you'd like to know. It was just a warm and fuzzy watch, and I really needed that. So I'm passing on to you what I thought about it. Okay, general stuff. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests in the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. And I've just recently done a couple videos for TikTok. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it. I feel like it's iffy at best, but whatever. I'm giving it a college try. And that's under Susan Ruthism as well on TikTok. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this and being a part of this for 8 years so far. Be well, be kind, be love, lift each other up. Here we go. Richard Estep, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to speak with you because you are a fascinating human, the things that you do, and we are going to get into all of it. But let's start with your childhood. Tell me where you're from and what set you on your path.
I come from the UK originally, the Midlands, a city called Leicester, which is famous, I guess, mildly famous for its soccer. More famous because we hide our kings under car parks, under parking lots in Leicester. But that was home until my mid-20s when I relocated to the US in 1999. So I spent exactly half of my life on each side of the Atlantic at this point.
In your childhood, did you begin to experience things that other people couldn't see? How did you get into becoming someone that was interested in the ether?
No, I didn't, and I still don't. I've been fascinated with ghosts, especially hauntings, but UFOs and things of that nature, the whole gamut of the unexplained since I was a boy. Growing up, my grandparents had a friendly ghost in their haunted haunted home, a sweet old lady that had been a former resident and had died there and stuck around and made appearances every so often. So I was fascinated with the subject from childhood. And of course, there was no TV then, no paranormal TV, I should say. So probably a good thing, because if you wanted to satisfy your curiosity about all things weird and wonderful, you went to the library, got a library card, which I did, and checked out every book 5 times over by people like Hans Holzer and Peter Underwood and Harry Price and some of the luminaries in the field. And that is how I really got my education and passion for things that go bump in the night.
Was there something that struck you as a common ground to have the confluence that made a haunting happen, or was it happenstance depending on the house or place?
Haunting, I think, is an umbrella term. It's one that we use, and I think it's lazy for us to default to haunting equals dead people. I think it's stranger than that. And there are many different categories and subcategories of hauntings, many different types of phenomena. There are no true commonalities in every case, which is what makes researching them so interesting and so frustrating at the same time.
So you have different things that you do. You go around and you investigate paranormal activity. You're a paramedic, which is an interesting choice because I'm sure you see the fine line between living and dead in that kind of profession. And then you are an author writing about all the things that you have researched. So let's start with the paramedic part.
Yeah, I had no desire to be a paramedic at all. When I came to the UK, from the UK rather, to the US in 1999, what I missed, apart from the obvious homesickness and culture shock, I was in the British Army, Territorial Army, when I was in the UK. And I missed the camaraderie of being in a platoon, of that kind of meaningful hands-on work and that kind of service mentality. But I had an IT career. My life here in the US was kind of dependent on that IT career. I also wasn't going to just up and join the military. So I really didn't do more than ponder that for a couple of years. And then 9/11 happened. And of course, the cliche is we all know where we were and what we were doing on 9/11. And I was at my job for a computer company at the time, monitoring networks, watching it happen on live TV, and just felt that I wanted to do something. So I've been pondering the National Guard. I ended up instead going to my local firehouse and saying, how do I sign up? So I became a volunteer firefighter. To do that, you have to become an EMT, which I did. I found how much fire the fire department doesn't do anymore. 80% of what most fire departments do are emergency medical calls in this country. I remained a firefighter for 15 years, retired about 4 years ago from that, but I still continue to run 911 calls. I'm in my 23rd year right now, serving as a paramedic and a paramedic educator. And I enjoy being able to not only serve the community and my fellow human beings, I also enjoy almost everything that comes about the discipline and art of paramedicine.
Did you found the Code Green campaign, or is that something you're just part of? Okay, tell me about the...
Yeah. My first book, In Search of the Paranormal, when it came out, the Code Green campaign. So there is a significant issue with mental health in the emergency response field. Many of us have mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, things of that nature. Suicide happens far too often, I'm afraid. And the Code Green campaign was a charity that was founded to specifically help educate and direct resources to first responders. And so I was aware of it. And when my first book came out, I wanted to donate a percentage of the profits. 10% of the royalties from In Search of the Paranormal were donated to the Code Green campaign.
That's lovely. It is an unfortunate. It's just like the military PTSD funds and things. It's really sad that is the offshoot of people who are really serving humanity and the price that they pay for that.
There is definitely a price that goes with it. When it comes to the military, at least, we are far too quick to send our military to war, and yet we are less willing to help them pick up the pieces of shattered lives afterwards. It's similar with the emergency services, I think, also. None of us are drafted. We all choose that profession. We all choose that vocation. Nonetheless, it would be impossible to experience the things we experience and not have some degree of psychological trauma. So, of course, it's never a competition or anything like that. Some people are hit significantly harder than others based upon a variety of factors, and they need and deserve our compassion and our assistance.
Yeah, I agree. I talk about these sorts of things a lot on this show. I think it's incredibly important. Tell me about when you were younger at your grandparents' house. Did you I assume saw her, the ghost. Did you interact with her, or did you not ever
Nope.
see her and only heard about her?
I only heard about her. My stepfather had told me the stories, and she appeared during the 1940s when my grandfather was serving in the Burma campaign, fighting against the Japanese army. So my grandmother was alone. You can imagine one of those World War II era families. She's trying to raise a gaggle of kids on her own. Meanwhile, at night, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Forces, bombing, the heck out of the city. It was a very stressful time. I often think that the ladies that primarily staff the home front do not get nearly enough credit as part of the greatest generation, because they raised families not knowing if they were widows. They raised families in these horrific conditions. And my grandmother, although she didn't know it, had the help of this former resident of the house, because this lady would go into the children's common bedroom that they shared at night after bedtime, and would just make sure that all was as it should be after lights out, that they were all tucked in. And it didn't occur to one of the kids that she wasn't a flesh and blood human being, in that way that children just don't ask questions. An adult walks into the room, she would come into the room, look around, make sure everyone was good, and then leave again. And they only really mentioned it after my grandfather returned from the war, and my grandmother was like, there was no lady. Describe her. And the kids, of course, all told the same story. They described the same lady, which was the woman that had owned the house before they did and had passed away downstairs. I heard that story, and I thought, this is really cool. But when you're sleeping in that same bedroom alone, it's terrifying as well. So your mind turns every creaking floorboard, into a phantom footstep. And I think half of me was kind of hoping that I would have a ghost encounter, and half of me was terrified that I would. It's the ultimate kind of yin-yang duality. And I never did. It would be too Hollywood a story if I did, right? But it did set me on this road to being fascinated with ghosts and hauntings and why they are the way they are. There was nothing really for those kids scary about this haunting at all. And it's a classic example of a ghost with a mission. And once that mission, which was, to help out while my grandmother was under all the stress, once that mission was completed, she didn't stick around. She went out, she never appeared again. And I like to think she congratulated herself for a job well done, and moved on to whatever comes next. And now that my grandparents have both passed, I really do like to think that maybe they got to have a chat and sit around and finally meet in person and laugh about that. But without her, I would not have this career. I would not be this teller of ghost stories. So I owe that long dead lady my thanks too.
That's a great story. I was thinking about this last night, actually, while contemplating questions I would have for you. And I thought, gosh, who wouldn't love to be able to sit down and talk? There's that show Ghosts, right? And I thought, how wouldn't that be so wonderful? And at the same time, I think I would probably be scared to death if they first showed up. And like you said, what a duality that is, because I want that so badly, but then I think, oh, well, would I just be screaming, crying, and running the other way, even if they were a nice ghost?
I mean, they're really just people without the meat suit, most of them. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, right? As we think about why they're so frightening to us, the answer really is Hollywood. We've all seen story. If you had never seen a Hollywood ghost story, if you had never been exposed to that, I think that natural curiosity and sense of wonder we have as human beings, especially children, would be the overriding emotion. We've conditioned ourselves to make them scary, and I bear some responsibility for this. I mean, I've gotten some scary book covers out there on purpose, which is kind of a bait and switch in some cases, because I do want people to actually pick up the books and read them. And the sad truth is, especially these days, most people are not that interested in pleasant, nice, friendly ghosts. That's not what sells, to our great misfortune. But in reality, I think the vast majority of cases I've investigated have been friendly or at worst, neutral hauntings. There have been some dark and aggressive ones. They do happen. Of course they do. But I would not say they're in the majority. And you can say the same about people. You
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Should we be afraid of some ghosts? Sure. We should be afraid of some strangers. There's a reason we still lock our doors at night, Unfortunately, women know this far better than males do, and so I won't patronize you by having to tell you that. It's just worth remarking that there are dangerous individuals out there, living and dead. But I do think the majority of people are decent, kind, and friendly, And I think the same is true with ghost spirits, or call them what you will.
I wonder if in scenarios like the woman that was in your grandparents' house, if she didn't necessarily hang around there, but when she was needed, was pulled back to do a job, and then once that was done, sort of Mary Poppins style, said, "See you later."
Oh, maybe she was drafted. You mean kind of the
yeah?
It's possible. I'll tell you though. I mean, my most common area of, I shouldn't say expertise, but concentration is haunted hospitals. I mean, I'm known for that show primarily, written several books on haunted healthcare, and I get asked a lot about, why are hospitals so haunted? Leaving aside the death and those kind of things, something that is well worth bearing in mind is that the medical profession is filled with men and women who feel called. It's a calling. There are some people that go to medical school or nursing or whatever for the money, of course, but there are easier ways to get rich. The vast majority of people, whether they're physicians taking the Hippocratic Oath or EMTs, staffing an ambulance, or hospital cleaners, they feel compelled to service of their fellow human beings. And I think that, I've run into so many cases of medical staff being on duty long after they actually died. I don't really run into this with stockbrokers. I've yet to meet a phantom bank manager, stockbroker, advertising executive, computer network engineer, telesalesperson. I don't run into that. Why? Well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't stick around and want to do that job for all eternity, or even I wouldn't want to do, certain kinds of jobs, administrative, bureaucratic jobs. I wouldn't want to do that in the afterlife. But helping people, there's a sacred component to that, I don't mean it in a religious sense, but I mean at a fundamental spiritual level, it's a sacred thing. Human beings taking care of other sick and vulnerable human beings. And I think that imperative sometimes survives the death of the body. And there are a number of cases of medical facilities I've investigated where it seems as though some of those doctors, nurses, and so forth, x-ray technicians in one case, they are still taking care of people, or at least they believe they are, long after they punched the clock for the last time.
I wonder if they take care of other ghosts or haunted persons. I don't know what the proper terminology is, but ones who have passed from their illness. And it would be interesting if the medical ghosts are still taking care of the ghosts that are sick. Yeah,
I hope not. Mediums tell us that disease, pathology, illness does not come with us beyond the physical body, which would make sense to me.
Yeah.
Pathologies of the body should probably be left behind with the body. But I do think that the word caring has a wide definition, and we care for one another in countless different ways, Not all of it is putting on bandages and things of that nature.
I'd like to think that the telemarketer ghosts are actually demons. Calling at 7:00 while we're eating dinner.
Yeah, is there some kind of spiritual no-call list I can get on so I don't get EVPs from them? That'd be great. It's the joke, isn't it, about I'm still waiting for the EVP or the Ouija board message that tells me we've been trying to reach you about your extended warranty.
Yes. Tell me, so you've written over 30 books?
Yeah, 34 I think it is at the moment.
I'm sure every time you get interviewed, you get asked for the highlight reel. So let's take it one level down. What are some interesting stories that you came across that aren't necessarily the big woo, but something that you haven't talked about a lot?
I don't just write ghost stories. I mean, that's something I write true crime books. I've written a book about corruption throughout U.S. history. I've written comic books for DC Thompson's Commando comics, military comic books. It's a broad net that is cast. And right now I'm just gearing up to go to Chicago to research a book on Mothman for next year. So I'm always looking for what's a good story. And a good story has human beings at its heart, a good human interest story. The reason the ghosts fascinate me so much, I think, is that these are people that had, they may have lived hundreds of years before we did, but they had the same stresses, the same aspirations, the same hopes, fears, dreams, anxieties, concerns. The more you study history, and I think ghosts are really a reflection of history given form and voice, the kind of like echoes in a way. The more you study it, you realize the old saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same is absolutely true. So it almost, to me, doesn't matter whether I'm writing about a haunted house or whether I'm writing about the Battle of Gettysburg or whether I'm writing about some other facet of human life. Any person or people that I can connect with and connect to and help readers connect with fascinates me. And I love telling those stories.
Mm-hmm. Have you been physically touched by something you can't see?
Yeah, on more than one occasion. I mean, the most blatant one was at a place called Fox Hollow Farm in Indiana, which was the home of the serial killer, Herbert Baumeister, the I-70 Strangler. And in his pool room, the room of the swimming pool, the pump room that adjacent to the pool, which houses the pump machinery and operating gear, I was very, very clearly touched on the tricep. Caressed is the word I would use. It was most definitely a creepy touch. And of course, Herb Baumeister was a serial killer who, although he was married, was in the closet and targeted only males as his victims. So I had just swum in the swimming pool in which he committed most of those murders. And so that kind of caress of the back of the arm, I can feel it now, and I'm going cold just relating the story to you.
Mm. I was recently in Decatur, Alabama at a place called the McIntyre House, and we were filming a documentary, and the camera equipment was just going haywire. So my DP said, hey, could you we get it, we're on your turf, but just let it be. And then everything went to normal again. But she and I, in different parts of the house, during different parts of the day, without saying it to each other, both felt the same things. The house is on a river.
Yeah.
A cold, wet hand grabbing our right ankle.
Interesting. Both times the right ankle?
Both times the right ankle.
I wonder if there's some significance to that.
I could feel it was cold and wet.
What you said about the equipment is interesting too, because usually they seem to want acknowledgement. And if you just treat them with that kind of respect, I'm not saying you were disrespectful. I'm saying it doesn't occur to most people to go into a place and ask thin air to be nice. It's not logical.
It seemed logical to us to be like, hey, we get it, we're on your turf, but we're just going to be here for a short while.
Mm-hmm. But it was only after you said that your equipment stopped going on the...
That is true, yeah.
So it's almost when you make that acknowledgement that, hey, yes, I understand this is your turf. Please meet us halfway, we'll be respectful, and then we'll be on our way. It's amazing how often that works well.
Yeah, although the hands were disconcerting, and it felt like different than whatever was messing with it's weird how you can feel the difference, to me at least.
Yeah, I love that kind of experience.
Have you ever been just downright terrified? Of
ghosts? Generally not.
Yeah.
I would say very disconcerted, but you have to be aware of what you bring in with you, and what I mean by that is that if you bring a fearful approach to this, then you're more likely to encounter something that will manifest and kind of feed on that fear. If you go in full of respect and courtesy and light and optimism, generally your experience will be a positive one. I mean, not 100% of the time, but when you're in conversation with a stranger, if you are nice and polite, friendly and personable, chances are that interaction is going to go better, right? If they're having a really bad day, no matter what you say, it's going to be bad. But for most people, I think that's true. And so the same is true in this. I encourage people that are investigating or visiting haunted locations, show these people the same kind of courtesy and respect you would want shown to you. And when you do that, it removes a lot of the fear. There's sometimes an icky factor, the serial killer's house, like I said, that was definitely, not a pleasant thing to experience. But for the most part, if you control your own mind and approach it in a rational and respectful way, there's usually nothing to fear.
Do you believe that we're all capable of seeing and or feeling them versus how mediums really can tune in? Do you think that's a gift that everybody has? They just don't necessarily. I think about kids. Kids seem to be really open. And then as you get older, you are told that, oh no, it's all in your head, or there's nobody in the closet or under your bed or whatever.
Yeah.
That mediums seem to have a way to figure out how to get past the gatekeepers. Do you think we're all capable of that?
I don't know that we're all capable as adults in the same way that we're not all capable of performing certain functions or tasks. Some people have an aptitude. Some people have an artistic aptitude. They can have no formal training and yet be able to draw or paint or sculpt the most beautiful thing. And then there are others that work hard and painstakingly to develop that aptitude. I think that's possible in some cases as well. But do I think we're all sensitive as adults? Not necessarily. As children, as you pointed out, I still vividly remember being a young boy, and you believe that there are fairies at the bottom of the garden, and you believe that magic is real. And, you're exposed to those kind of stories, and you don't question it, which is good. And then the world kind of catches up with you, and you learn about skepticism and cynicism and mockery and the cruelty of other children, and we stop believing in magic. And so I think belief underpins a lot of this field. What you believe is of huge significance.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of the idea of mimics?
Certainly, mimicry has happened to me. I think that it's tempting to ascribe that to a malicious, malevolent entity because it sounds really sinister, right? The idea of seeing another version of you, a doppelganger, or of hearing your voice come from a place where you are not. But I also wonder about things like alternate explanations, time slips, interactions with other dimensions, alternate universes, is this an alternate version of us bleeding over into our world? Is this a future or past version of us that we are encountering? And it comes back to the idea that, we equate ghosts to dead people. I think it may, in some cases, be far weirder than that.
I like that theory.
It's no less viable an idea than that we survive death and we're able to talk to the living.
There are a lot of TikTok accounts that do the EVP, the ghost boxes. What do you think about those?
So ghost boxes, they're a tool that I use sparingly. Audio pareidolia is a thing. And pareidolia, I don't know if you're familiar with the term.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, but they may not be.
So just for your viewers or listeners, pareidolia is the idea that our brain desperately wants to create sense out of chaos. A great example of pareidolia is the man in the moon. You look up at the moon, you're told there's a face, and as soon as you see it, you cannot unsee it. You look at a cloud, you see what looks like an elephant chasing a dragon or whatever, and then you can't unsee it. Now, of course, these are obviously random patterns. There isn't literally a face on the moon. But our brain struggles to make sense out of the chaos. It wants to turn the chaotic into the ordered familiar. A lot of the time, those spirit boxes, the way those sessions will often work will be that you'll hear the kind of random static, the crackle, and then you'll hear a burst of noise, and the host will say something like, "It said, kill Jeff." And now all your brain can hear when they replay it is "kill Jeff." You've been auto-suggested. Suggestion, confirmation bias, those are huge when it comes to spirit boxes. There's a real danger that the ear hears what it wants to hear. There are some great content creators on social media, and there are also some absolute charlatans.
Yeah.
There are some delusional individuals that are doing it to aggrandize themselves. And then there are the genuine storytellers that are really passionate about telling truthful stories. So as with any other field in life, I think evaluate and choose your mentors, your role models, the people you look up to, choose them carefully. Find those creators that have integrity, that are interested in telling a story. There are far too many out there that are trading on, the night I almost died in the demon house of death. And I've been to many of these houses and had some of the best night's sleep of my life. I'm not saying they're not necessarily haunted. I'm saying that it's a race to the bottom in terms of who can say the most shocking thing, who can, make the most horrifying claims, all for views, all for clicks.
Right. You started a society to investigate all. What year did you start that, the Paranormal Investigation Society?
Co-founded that with my wife Laura in 2005, I believe it was. And it's no longer active in that form. Primarily, what it does now is myself and a small group of trusted colleagues, we investigate haunted locations. Very rarely we'll do help cases, but private cases. But for the most part, we invested haunted locations as part of my book projects.
Okay. Do you think orbs are a thing?
I think the vast majority of orbs, 99.9% of them, are pollen, dander, dust, insects, particles that get very close to a lens, and then they almost always appear when a flash is used, which is a big giveaway. I started investigating in the mid-90s when there were no digital cameras. We did not get orbs. Why? Well, number one, we were really careful about where we took pictures because you had to pay to have them developed, which meant that rather than just fire off, a burst of them in a row in a very dusty underground basement or tunnel or whatever, you chose your shots carefully. When you did use a flash, the flash was usually offset from the lens more than it is on a phone. Problem with the orb effect is you get this flash, the photons go out, they hit this object that's close to the lens, relatively small particle, a bug, whatever it might be, a droplet of moisture. They come right back at a very narrow angle, and you get that orb effect. This has really been a phenomenon that's unique to the age of the digital camera. When photographs became very affordable, they're free, so you can shoot 1,000 photographs in a night. Then we talked about pareidolia, didn't we? The idea that you look at this glowing orb and you see a face, and if you're suggestive enough, and also, one of the concerning things is if you're bereaved, if you really want to believe, as we all do, that the dead are not gone forever, perhaps your brain influences you to think that kind of looks like my lost loved one, when in reality it's a perfectly natural phenomenon. That being said, there are also light phenomena which aren't explainable in that way. If you're seeing these lights with the naked eye, there's no camera flash involved, then you've got something that's harder to explain, and then I'm very much interested.
Mm-hmm. This was Decatur. There's a bank building there that is no longer a viable bank. It's a museum. And I went into the safe. They had said that it was haunted. And I tried using my phone's recording, just the voice recorder, didn't get anything. And then I remembered I have that app that is for sleeping that, it's attuned to be able to pick up the tiniest sound and then turn off if you're breathing or whatever.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to use that and see what I get. So I sat in there by myself, door shut, with this thing. Mm-hmm. And I'll be damned, there was a little girl saying her tummy hurt, and there was a man whistling a whole tune. And I came out of the vault and I went into the office and I said, these are the things I got. And the woman's like, oh yeah, those are two of the people that are here. And I thought, is she just saying that to me, or did I really get that?
Phenomenal though, right? I mean, that's terrific. You have some eyewitness testimony to act as verification. You clearly have voices that were not present at the time. Like, you didn't hear them with your own voice. Nobody was speaking. That is far more impressive to me than the just crackling, hissing static that may or may not have been a voice.
Yeah.
So, yeah. give me a good EVP. I'm a big fan of those.
The book about the funeral home in Ontario, is that out now?
Out next month, the Blumberg.
Very exciting. I interviewed them, and I want to go stay there desperately.
You should. It's terrific. Sleep with one eye open.
How is your personal experience there? I know you've got the book, so let's talk a little bit. The book's coming out. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the more active locations I've ever investigated. The TV show, the only criticism I have of the show was that it was too short. I wish it had been twice as long, because I think there's such a colorful family and there's such a rich seam to be mined there of storytelling. But they were nice enough to give me complete access to the house and to them. We put them to work. We taught them how to investigate. Rather than just kind of peripheral characters in the book, they are the core of the book. We had communications. One that really brought a tear to everybody's eye was that Noah, the teenage daughter, she has the entire third floor to herself. For a while, she'd been hearing footsteps walking around the third floor while she was alone up there, and then would wake up in the night several times because she felt somebody sitting on the end of her bed. And when she would wake up and look up, there was nobody there. So we tried a few methods of research, got some interesting EVPs, finally threw down a talking board. And I know that many people are biased against the talking board or Ouija board. It's a tool like any other, and as long as you set good boundaries and intent, it's no more harmful, I believe, than using any other method of attempted communication. We made contact with a communicator that claimed to be a local lady who had not died in the funeral home, but her husband came through the funeral home and she'd been here because of his funeral. She had died locally and was still around and was drawn to Noah because she missed her own children. Now, I'm always healthily skeptical of talking boards, so because there are those theories and they're very valid that sometimes what you're doing is you are communicating with the subconscious of one or more of the participants, that they are moving that planchette without consciously knowing they're doing it. That is a thing. So I decided to test it. Upstairs in the kitchen, we were down in the cellar in what was the old embalming room. So I went upstairs to the kitchen where Aaron, the dad, was preparing dinner. And I said, Aaron, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to write on this piece of paper a number between 1 and 100. Do not tell me what it is. I'm going back downstairs, but write it, leave it face up on the kitchen counter. And he did. And then we had this session, it was very emotional for everybody, especially for Noah and her mom. I asked the board, do me a favor, would you please run upstairs and look at the piece of paper on the counter and tell me that number. Now, there's a 1 in 100% chance you could get this right randomly or by guesswork. Those are not great odds. The number Aaron had chosen was 78. The planchette, and we didn't know this at the time, the planchette went to 7, then 8, then 7 again, and then flew off the board. So I'm like, 78 or 87? And the planchette, we put it back on, said yes. I texted Aaron, what was that number? And he sent me a photograph. And the board was right. So now this still doesn't mean dead people. It could be an interesting form of psychic information transfer. Maybe Heather is so in tune with her husband that she was, without knowing it, subconsciously, literally reading his mind. That's also as possible as dead people. But they're good friends of mine, but still, I try not to leave stones unturned. So I said, Heather, I'm really sorry to ask you this, but may I see your phone? I need to see your text messages with Aaron, your husband. My skeptical side was like, if they were going to fake this, he could just have texted her that number the minute I went downstairs, and I would never know. And so I looked at her text string for the day, and it was all, minutia, mundane stuff, nothing to do with a number. There is no way that board could randomly have come up with that number. 1 in 100% chance.
Yeah.
So it was a very fulfilling and very emotional Ouija board session down in the embalming room of that old funeral home.
Wow, that's so cool. I really want to go there.
You absolutely should.
How do you go about picking where you're going to go?
I have a bucket list. Despite growing up in Britain, I've always been a massive Civil War enthusiast and also of Westerns. So last year, I decided I wanted to go experience Tombstone, Arizona. And so I got together my small team of friends and fellow investigators, and we did an epic road trip. We did Haunted Tombstone. We were lucky enough to get into the OK Corral, for example, which is somewhere I've always wanted to go and investigate there. The mines, the silver mines underneath the town, we were investigating there. And then on the way back, Lincoln County, New Mexico, on the trail of Billy the Kid. And really, I am just fulfilling one lifelong bucket list, and I'm taking readers along with me. And I'm fortunate that my friends are supportive, that they will, at the drop of a hat, drive halfway across the country to go stay in some haunted hovel because it sounds cool.
Yeah, well, add me to that list if you ever need another person. I'm a heavy lifter.
You never know. It depends on, I get across the country, I turn up in all kinds of weird and wonderful places, so you never know.
Yeah, and you get to go to the House of the Shining, the what is that hotel called? The
Stanley.
Yeah, the Stanley.
I gave tours there for 3 years, and I very much enjoyed it. I can't write about that because I'll choose my words carefully. the ghosts are not something that the hotel encourages people to write about. Let's put it like that, which is unfortunate, but I certainly respect that they have that opinion. They have that right, rather.
How do they feel about The Shining?
I can't speak for them. I will say personally that without Stephen King, that hotel would not still be in existence. Stephen King really saved the Stanley. I mean, it was bankrupt twice, I believe it was, throughout its history. Because it's now known as the Shining Hotel, it attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. And there is so much more to it. There is the rich history. It's a very cool place to go. I encourage anybody to visit. There's so much more to it than the Stephen King connection and the ghosts. But those are still the two reasons people flock to that hotel, for good or for ill.
Of all the hotels you've been to, is that one of the more haunted?
It absolutely, in my experience, lived up to its reputation. It seems like every hotel has its ghost, in the same way that every hospital does. And it's an open secret, with a lot of hotel managers and owners, that there is usually at least one ghost story affiliated with every hotel. So I would say the Stanley definitely ranks high up there, yeah, definitely. But I've got a lot more to try, hopefully.
Do you, when you go into these places that are allegedly haunted, do you do any sort of protection practice around yourself, or are you a walking protected person in everything you do?
I didn't used to. I used to actually scoff at people that did, which is hubris and quite arrogant. They say pride goeth before the fall, so I ended up bringing something home from a haunted location, something unpleasant, I think. Or at the very least, it was disruptive, because my wife and I were seeing shadow figures inside the house. My dog would go, bananas when there was no one there. We heard a woman's voice calling out in the house, things like that. And then the last straw was when a bunch of framed photographs just appeared to jump off of the mantelpiece and almost landed on my cat, who was sleeping down below. And that's when I got angry. Mess with us, it's one thing. You mess with my animals, we are going to war. So although I'm an agnostic, I called a friend of mine, Stephen, who was a Catholic priest and a certified exorcist, and he came to the house and he blessed the house. He spent about 2 hours going from room to room. He would anoint the doorways and windows with holy water crosses. And I asked him, I said, Stephen, I'm an agnostic. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in the same thing you do. And he said, that's okay. That you believe is what matters, not specifically what you believe, which I found very enlightening and interesting. And he went systematically from room to room, floor to floor, almost as if you were sweeping dust and dirt out of your home. You would go from the back to the front and then sweep it all out the front door. That's what he did. And the disturbances stopped instantly.
Yeah, I think it's about boundaries. And
yes, agreed.
I feel like people have dominion over themselves, regardless if they believe in a higher power or not, or any of this. And it's one of those things like, I think, well, maybe it's not whether I believe in them, but whether they believe in me.
I think you make a great point, and people do have dominion over themselves. So I did learn some protection, and I will set boundaries verbally. When I leave a location, I will categorically state that nobody or nothing is permitted to attach to me. Nothing can follow me from this place or anybody that I'm with. And then I do some basic light work, just some visualization of like the golden kind of light that is coming down from above, and it's kind of washing any negativity, anything that may have attached to you out of you, going from top to bottom, and then you leave it behind like an icky, muddy puddle on the floor, step out of it and go. And it really is just giving a focus to that very specific belief, I think.
Yeah.
Since I've done that, there's an old saying, if it sounds stupid and it works, it's not stupid. And this is officially not stupid, because it's worked for me ever since.
Do you think when you pass away, do you want to stick around for a minute and do a little ghosty action, or do you want to go wherever it is to go?
My thought is that, again, I think a common mistake we make, we talk about a place being haunted, and we tend to assume it's always haunted. 3:00 in the morning on a bank holiday Monday, it's haunted. Christmas Day at 9, it's haunted. It's haunted Wednesday night. I kind of think if there's any such thing as, the free will in the next life or whatever form it takes, I like to think we get to travel and we get to visit and revisit. The mediums that say that spirits don't experience time in the same way as they're living, I find that very encouraging. I hope I can revisit my childhood. I hope I can revisit places and times long gone, maybe bounce ahead into the future. Who knows? I like to think that there will be variety, that we are not psychically shackled or chained to one specific time and place. That's my hope. It makes no sense to me that a being of some other form of energy that's no longer subject to the rules of, earthly physics, why would you be stuck in one place? It just doesn't make sense.
I like that thought too, that we can go anywhere at any time. That's a nice thought. If somebody wants to get into this, what are some of the top hints of, or the plan of action?
I'd say probably reading is key, and I'm very biased, as we all have our own biases. So I think it's very tempting to assume because you've seen it on TV, it's the right way to do it. And I think that is a mistake. What you see on TV is primarily entertainment. It is heavily edited, and sometimes it's grossly distorted. I suggest finding somebody knowledgeable and ethical that you can work with. Read widely. And read the classics too. I mean, there are some terrific books out there. I would always recommend Guy Lyon Playfair's book, This House is Haunted, about the Enfield haunting. It's one of the most definitive case studies of a haunting you've ever seen, and that dates back to the 1970s. The book is as relevant today as it ever was. Read widely, choose your role models carefully, and you don't need to invest an entire rent or mortgage payment in equipment. That's a common misperception. You can get what you need to do a thorough, solid investigation for under $100. If you think about the original psychical researchers, Sir Oliver Lodge, William Crookes, Arthur Conan Doyle, Catherine Crowe, people of that nature, and I should probably have said Catherine Crowe first, because she was really the old guard, they did not have the gadgets that we have today. They didn't have these massive tech budgets. They didn't have infrared cameras and SLS cameras and things like that. They had a pencil, a notepad, and most interestingly of all, I think, an inquisitive, rational, logical mind. If you have that, you can record EVPs on your phone just using its voice memo function. You can snap photographs that way. So it can be very affordable. There are no shortage of charlatans and hucksters that are willing to try and separate you from your money. So I would also advise you that in the paranormal field, as in many fields in life, your willingness to believe somebody's claims, you should factor in how hard they're trying to separate you from your money.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
I do think that those sleep, for anyone listening, the sleep apps that record you while you're sleeping, they seem to be more, pick up quieter things better than the regular voice recorder, at least in my experience of one time.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. It sounded like you got a great result.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't buy equipment either, but by the same token, if you're going to start strength training, you can begin with push-ups. You don't have to go buy a home multi-gym or an annual gym membership, right? You can start out and then you can modify, you can slowly add. And by the same token, there does not need to be a steep buy-in to this. Start with an inquiring, inquisitive mind, educate yourself, read widely rather, and wisely, why not? Don't assume that the TV will teach you what you need to know. There is some good stuff on TV. There are some ethical people working on TV. The same is true of YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and places like that. But there is definitely a dark side to that as well.
Yeah. And how might people find you? What's the best way? And what if somebody has a haunting that they're unsure of? Can they reach out to you, or is that something that you're not really into, just random people?
I do. If people ask me for advice, I do give it. Bear in mind that free advice is worth what you pay for it, and I never charge for advice. That's not what I mean. You can reach me through my website, richardestep.net, and I do love talking to people with an interest in this field. I really do. So reach out to me there on Facebook. I'm Richard Estep Author. On Instagram, I'm Estep R. Same thing on Twitter or X or whatever Elon is calling it this month. So you can catch me on social media as well.
Okay, great. I really appreciate your time. It's such an interesting field. I'm really glad we got a chance to talk. Thank you for being open to it.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. And everyone, the new book comes out. It's a Grave Undertaking. And that'll be out at the end of August?
End of August. A grave undertaking, and I hope you dig it.
That's great. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye now.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.